My name is Doc. I'm a professional yo-yoer, game designer, and musician, and today I'm going to show you one of my all-time favorite skills, how to make a mini comic from a single sheet of paper.
Find a sheet of paper, let's make a zine together right now.
Like I said, this is a guide on how to make mini comics. Mini comics are these 8-page comics that are made from a single sheet of paper. This is 8.5 by 11 paper that you can get anywhere. You can also use A4. You can actually use any size paper that you want. And they're called mini comics, mini zines, staple-free comics, all sorts of names for it. If you hear me say zine, a zine is an independent style of magazine, a self-published form of communication similar to a comic. Basically, if you're using comic panels and art to tell a narrative story using sequential art, then you're probably making a miniature comic. And if you're using words with occasional images of some sort, then that's probably a zine. Cookbooks would probably be a good zine, and Spider-Man is a classic comic book. So that's kind of the difference. It doesn't really matter in terminology. But just as an example, I actually made the mini comics mixtape, which was a batch of different comics, including how to make a mini comic, a comic about where I grew up in Chapel Hill, Tennessee, an abridged version of Akira, Let Them Go to the Colonies, a fan comic about Blade Runner, Tools, this is just a zine about different tools that I like to use. Yo, the story of how I got into yo-yoing. Cape Day, a story about being a superhero every day of the year, not just once a year. And 6 skateboard tricks that I wish I could do. Yes, those are some of my comic zines. Let's get into how to make a comic. For this tutorial, you'll just need a sheet of paper and scissors. Scissors are optional. What we're going to do is learn how to fold the comic first. Now, to fold a mini comic, what I always like to do is take a blank sheet of paper and fold it lengthwise. So I'm folding it the long ways. I'm going to line up these 2 corners, give it a little crease, line up these bottom 2 corners, give them a little crease, and just continue folding. You don't need any fancy tools for folding. Once you've got a good crease going, unfold your paper. And we just did a fold in half lengthwise. What we're going to do now is we're going to fold the paper in half this way, short-wise. So I'm going to, again, line up these 2 corners and fold. So we've folded our comic in half once, unfolded it, and then we folded it again. Now we're going to keep this fold, and we're going to grab this edge and fold it in again. So we're folding quarters. Again, we're just taking this half and we're going to fold it again. So you're going to do this on both sides. And the end result is you want to have something that looks like an M shape or a W, right? So this is kind of the accordion shape that you want to your zine. Now, the next thing you're going to do, once these creases are good, notice we still have this fold right here from the beginning. What we're going to do is we're going to unfold those last 2 folds we did. So now we have this, basically the paper is folded just in half, and we have all these nice creases here. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this crease to cut. We need to create a hole in the center of the paper. So what I'm going to do is grabbing the middle of the paper, we're just going to cut inwards. I use some scissors. So again, this is the middle of the paper. And I'm cutting right along that crease. So I'm just going from the middle in. And what you're going to find now is you're going to have this hole in the middle of the paper. Now, you've got these folds. What we're going to do is we're going to push the paper up, turn it sideways. I'm going to grab this middle section right here. I'm just going to grab it, and my hands go on top of each page. And I'm going to curl my hands outward and bring the paper up. This is going to be the basic fold for our zine. So we've got all these templates here, and I'm just grabbing these parts, squeezing, folding out, rotating. And now what I'm going to do is just going to press the paper. There's no right or wrong way to make your zine. However you have it is the right way to have it, as long as it's kind of 8 pages. This is going to be our 8-page zine. I often, though, don't like to have this as my front cover, this kind of middle sheet here. I like to have a nice crease for my front paper. So what I usually like to do is find one of these 2 sections that have that nice fold on the outside, and I'm going to make those my cover. And to do that, all I'm going to do is just fold that around. So any piece of paper, any one of these pages can be a cover. This could be a cover by just folding it, you know, so on and so forth. But I am going to do this. And that's how you fold your first mini zine. This time we're going to use this printout, which is available on docpop.org/zine. docpop.org/zine. This is the How to Make a Mini Comic by Dr. Popular. This is free to download. It is absolutely free to use however you want. It is copyright free, Creative Commons, public domain. You can do whatever you want to with it. So you can print this out at home if you like. And it's a tutorial on how to make one of these own comics. Here's how to make a zine if you've already printed something out like this. We're going to still do that lengthwise fold. This is just to give us a guide for later. And this time we're going to fold in this way. Fold the paper in half again. Grab this edge, tuck it in. Grab this edge, tuck it in. Once you've got this W accordion, you can unfold and you can cut the paper along this ridge right here. We have this nice little ridge, but what I like to do is I like to just tear it. I like to tear my zines. So I do all these folds. I crease this a couple times and I use my fingernail to kind of get a good crease edge. And then I'm just going to tear. And again, this is coming from the center of the paper, going out. That's usually how I make my zines. So now we've got this opening right here. What we're going to do is grab these two corners, these two middle sections basically, and we're going to fold, tuck those papers in, give it a crease, and fold that cover. And you'll end up with something just like this. And hand it to someone.
Thank you.
Now, once you want to start filling in your mini comic or mini zine with art, the two ways to do that are to basically just draw on it as if it's a comic. And that's actually what I did here. For this example, I actually drew directly onto the paper. And when I was done, I would draw the next panel, and then I would draw the next panel. Batman versus the cupcake. Oh, Batman won. Okay. So that's one way to do it. It's just draw directly onto there. And when you're done, you've got like a colorful, one-of-a-kind piece of art that you can hand to friends. The other way to do it is you could draw on the pages themselves. You could draw, open up the page and draw traditionally like that. Now, if you want to do that, the best way to do it is to start with a blank book, and you're going to number each page. I would normally use a pencil to mark this so that I could erase it later. But for now, let's just make it nice and big so you can see that this is page 1, or the cover. And 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or the back cover. Once you've done this, again with pencil, you can open your paper, and now you can actually see how this is going to lay out. And notice we're going around counterclockwise. These pages are all going to be facing towards me. I'm going to draw my front cover, the first page inside, the second page inside. I'm going to turn everything 90 degrees and going left to right. I'm going to keep going until I get to the back cover. And your back cover can be whatever you want. It could be a copyright page. It can be the final page. Maybe you didn't have enough pages for your story. It could be a to be continued, whatever. So this is one way to kind of lay out your paper, is to fold it in advance and number each page and then unfold it. And when you're happy, start drawing and erase these numbers. Again, these numbers are permanent. So now we're going to talk about how to make something like this inside Procreate. Now, what I like to do is create a new canvas that's 8.5 by 11. And I like to use 300 DPI, which is going to be basically the nicest way to print this out. So you can use whatever paper you want. A4 paper is slightly different, but I'm using 8.5 by 11 for this, and I'm creating my zine. And then the first thing I do is I usually create a layer that is just my guides. So I draw one line in the middle of the paper, these lines over. You don't really have to worry about being precision and doing guides. You can kind of do it by eye. And once you get that, then you're going to go through and number your pages. I like to start with this as my cover. So this left-hand corner is always going to be my back cover. And this is page 1. 2, 3, and then the paper flips over, and it's 4, 5, 6, 7, back to 8. And once I'm done with my comic, once I've laid out my comic, then I just get rid of the guides and all that. But you can actually see here, just to help myself out, I numbered each page, 1, 2, 3, etc. Now, something else to keep in mind when you're doing this is some of these pages will actually be able to cross over into each other. If you notice here, the cover is one single page, but once you open it up, you could actually do a splash that goes across here. So for that, you could actually have an image continue from one point to another. I usually tend to keep these as static images, but you can see in this book, I do have a few pages that cross over and one big splash page, one big dramatic splash page. So once you open this up, you're going to see this nice big panel, which I really like. If you're doing this, just find a sheet of paper, make sure your canvas is that size. I'm using 8.5 by 11 and I'm doing 300 DPI. That's a good print resolution. Draw your grids on one layer, and then before you print it, you can remove those grids and you won't have these lines showing up, but they'll be there for when you're guiding, for when you're creating your comic. Now, another thing to keep in mind is these comics can be any size. I've got this great big pocket guide to Ohlone Solidarity. I've got my really tiny snail facts. So these are both folded the exact same way. This is just done with a larger sheet of paper, and this is done with half of a sheet of 8.5 by 11 paper. Both of these are really cool. You can even go smaller. You can make zines out of anything. You'll even find yourself sometimes folding little tiny zines out of receipts if you're desperate. All sorts of ways to do this. And now here are some other examples of cool comics like Ricky Rat Takes an L, Fat Pikachu, Gross and Terrible Cocktails, Goblin Life,
Find a sheet of paper, let's make a zine together right now. I'll show you how.
And like I said, my How to Make a Mini Comic is available for free, and you can do whatever you want to with it. I've seen it handed out to friends. I've seen it used in classrooms and schools. You can use this in your classroom. I've seen it in the front of comic book stores. Here in San Francisco, there's Comic Experience, had a whole batch of these in the front, which made my day. I went inside and, oh my God, there's comics everywhere. I've even seen translated ones like this. This is a really great adaptation in French of my How to Make Comic, which is totally allowed because this is public domain. Do whatever you want to with it. Thank you so much for giving me a little shout out in here. But yeah, there are French translations. I'd like to see this translated into Spanish and German. So feel free to do that. If you do, let me know. You can do whatever you want to with this comic. That's so cool though. And voila. And voila. Oh. And that's my guide on how to make mini comics. Folding the comics is really easy, but for some folks, getting started is a hard part. So I'm going to share a couple ideas for you just to get started. Share your favorite recipe. If you have plenty of space left, share 2 recipes, or maybe share a story about how you learned that recipe. Draw a comic about your favorite movie. Make a zine about your biggest fear. Take old newspapers and magazines and cut them up with a pair of scissors and just glue them into your own collage zine. And this is my favorite. If you have someone close to you, take your favorite story and turn it into a comic or zine and give it to them. It's an awesome gift. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Again, thanks to Silver Sprocket for letting me film inside their beautiful location here on Valencia Street. It's an awesome place to look at zines and get ideas for maybe zine stories that you might like to tell as well. And check out docpop.org/zine in order to get a PDF of my How to Make a Mini Comic zine that you can print out yourself and fold. You can do whatever you want to with it. Print it, sell it, modify it, translate it. I'm cool with it. Just have fun. And again, you don't even have to do that. You can just take a single sheet of paper and get started making your own zine without it.